Honourable.
Thank you.
For Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, as the Member of Parliament, whose riding includes Garrison Petawawa, the largest army base in Canada, the health and well-being of each member of the Canadian Armed Forces is my concern. Of similar concern are the people employed at Arnprior Aerospace who work in the aerospace industry and supply our military with the tools to do its job. Earlier this month, I asked the Minister of Defence an important question regarding Canadian jobs, procurement, and protecting the lives of our women and men in uniform. Canada's aerospace industry and its value chain contribute more than $20 billion in GDP and 160,000 jobs to the Canadian economy annually. In my riding, the Ottawa Valley riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, Arnprior Aerospace is a leading aerospace manufacturer. It has the capacity and skill set to supply quality products to companies like Boeing and others. As the Canadian government considers bids for the next generation fighter jet, the Prime Minister needs to stand up for Canadian jobs. Canadian workers and taxpayers want this government to publicly commit to disqualifying bidders who take business away from Canadian companies like Arnprior Aerospace during these difficult economic times. Canadian taxpayers are opposed to funding manufacturing jobs in Mexico or elsewhere, which is what some fighter jet aircraft bidders will do unless they're told no. The Canadians deserve much better. If the Prime Minister cared about the lives of the women and men serving their country in uniform, particularly as we approach Remembrance Day, he would admit to Canadians that his defence policy is a scam. Weak, insecure, disengaged is the appropriate name of the Liberal government defence plan unveiled in 2017. While it announced a plan of billions on Canadians' military over the next 20 years, who will be in this chamber 20 years from now to remind Canadians of another broken Liberal promise? It's important to retell Canadians that the jet fighter replacement program dates back to 1997 when Jean Chrétien was Prime Minister and the decision was made to join with our allies in the Joint Strike Fighter program. That would have seen Canada replace our aging fighter jet fleet with the fifth generation F-35. It's ironic that when this government attacks the former Conservative government over fighter jet procurement, it is in fact attacking Chrétien and his government's choice for a replacement fighter jet, a decision our Conservative government honored. Here we are, 23 years later. This is not the first time a Liberal government has used military procurement as a political football to kick around. Remembrance Day is a tough time for the families who lost a loved one during the war on terrorism in Afghanistan. They do not forget it was the decision by the Liberal Party to use military procurement, in this case replacing aging helicopters, during the 1993 election that meant our soldiers lacked strategic lift to avoid roadside bombs. The Chrétien Liberals' decision to cancel the Sea King replacement helicopter, the EH-101, was a cynical political act to get elected on the backs of the women and men who served their country in uniform. I remember the faces of the soldiers who died when their convoys drove over the roadside bombs. When the Liberals took office in 1993 and cancelled a Conservative order for replacement helicopters under circumstances like the F-35 debate, they paid $478 million in penalties and sought off a 20-year delay in finding a replacement helicopter. And, Madam Speaker, that does not count the lives we lost as a result.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And let me start off by saying that we obviously recognize Canada's aerospace industry as an engine for innovation, economic activity, and high-skilled unemployment. The aerospace industry contributes $25 billion to Canada's GDP and over 210,000 jobs to our economy. It ranked number one in terms of R&D among Canadian manufacturing industries, and its footprint is national in scope with important aerospace clusters in every region of the country. The aerospace industry is export-driven, with approximately 70% of total production exported, and Canadian aerospace firms, including small and medium enterprises, that are well integrated into global supply chains. And I really appreciate the question posed and the comments made by the member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, because the Canadian aerospace manufacturing sector, with businesses like Arnprior Aerospace, they create good jobs for Canadians in the Ottawa Valley, in my riding of Pontiac and beyond. I obviously I'm a neighbor to the member's riding, so I really do understand quite well how important this is to her constituency. And our government is engaged with industry and has been proactive in promoting Canada's aerospace sector. We've been successful in securing strategic investments in advanced technologies, driving innovation, and maintaining highly skilled jobs in Canada. So we're going to continue to attract and support new quality investments in the aerospace sector. For example, we announced nearly $885 million in funding to support the aerospace and space industries through innovation programs. With regard to procurement, we're continuing to engage with the Canadian industry on upcoming defense procurement programs to help drive investments in Canada's key industrial capabilities through the Industry and Technological Benefits, or ITB policy. Now, the ITB policy allows the federal government's significant purchasing power to support Canadian companies and their workers. Through this policy, our government leverages major defense and Coast Guard procurements to create jobs, to drive innovation, and to foster economic growth all across Canada. When a company wins a defense contract, for every dollar that they receive, they're required to reinvest a dollar back into Canada's economy. So what does that look like? Well, that reinvestment means that Canadian small and medium-sized businesses, which make up nearly 90% of the firms in Canada's defense industry, have opportunities to do business with prime contractors. These are business opportunities that can translate into long-term and sustainable work that's directly related to specific defense procurements, work that helps these businesses integrate into the global supply chains of aerospace and defense multinationals, and work that helps build and strengthen the strategic partnerships between Canadian business and Canada's research community to advance Canadian innovations. One recent example of our government leveraging successful industrial outcomes through procurement was the arrival of the first aircraft of Canada's future fixed-wing search and rescue fleet. This project has created hundreds of new jobs for Canadians. The CC-295 contractor, Airbus Defence and Space, continues to make investments in the Canadian aerospace and defence industry through the ITB policy. Strategic work packages directly related to the aircraft are providing Canadian companies the opportunity to participate in global supply chains and create high-value jobs in aerospace manufacturing, simulation and training, propulsion, and in-service support sectors. So the success of the ITB policy is concrete. It touches many small and medium-sized businesses from coast to coast to coast. And the 2020 annual report on the impact of the ITB policy shows that from 2014 to 2018, more than 400 small businesses are leveraging over $3.4 billion of ITB commitments as a result of active contracts.
For Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Speaker, for the sake of women and men who live with procurement decisions, I ask the Liberals, please do not play with people's lives. Arnprior Aerospace is a world leader in aerospace. It is a good source of jobs in my riding. As the government considers bids from companies, including Boeing, for the fighter jet contract, this government needs to send a clear, unambiguous signal to all fighter jet bidders. That is, any company which takes business out of Canada or uses the COVID pandemic as an excuse to shut down jobs in Canada will not be considered for this nearly $20 billion contract.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think it really is important for the Canadian public to understand just how strongly the aerospace sector is supported through this ITB policy. And it really does go directly to the member opposite's question, because the measure, the report of the ITB policy, the 2020 annual report, clearly indicates that over 360 Canadian small businesses are scaling up through supplier development opportunities, and over 220 small businesses are supplying goods and services directly related to procurements. And finally, over 25 Canadian small businesses have expanded their collaborative R&D networks as a result of ITB investments, enhancing their capacity for innovation. So going forward, our government is committed to making sure that our men and women have, in uniform, have the tools that they need to protect Canadians, and that the Canadian small and medium enterprises get the opportunities that they so richly deserve to help continue building the aerospace sector. We're going to keep doing that through our federal purchasing power, and I think we're committed to.
And the motion